Hello and welcome to day 2 of Ploughing 2024 at Ratheniska in County Laois. I hope if you're here today you've brought your sunscreen. If you're not and you're coming tomorrow, make sure you bring your sunscreen. We've been blessed by the sun gods. Here at the Agriland Pavilion today, that's on row 15, stand 289, we're having a series of live panel discussions in the tent. We'll have Ministers Pippa Hackett, Minister Martin Hayden. We'll have a live podcast recording for young farmers on the future of farming. So please do enter the tent for that and participate, ask questions as part of the live podcast. We'd love to see you. We'll also have a live podcast speaking to the INHFA, the FCI, the ACA, and we'll also bring you all the latest from the ploughing site with our team of reporters out and about. We've phone charging as well in the Agriland tent, as well as a competition you may see here behind me for a Merlot multi-farmer. For the use of that for 12 months could be very handy around the farm over the next while. So do stay tuned. I'm going to pop back into the tent for our first of our live panel discussions.
We're here live at Ploughing 2024 with the leader of Sinn Féin, Deputy Mary Lou McDonald. Deputy, what are you telling rural voters today?
So we're telling them that there's going to be an election soon, like they didn't know, and that as a country, rural dwellers, farmers will have a number of big choices to make, and when the election comes, we're going to come forward with our alternative. That's about infrastructure, housing, as you know, but that's also about building resilience in rural communities and on farms. And one of the big conversations that I have been having and hearing today is the issue of succession and how the next generation of young farmers are brought along into a life, but also an industry that is sustainable. And I think that's really, I know there's a lot of issues in the here and now and the derogation around the different schemes, acres, all of that is being talked about. Obviously the climate, different initiatives that are being taken by the farming community, which are great. But the big theme that I'm hearing so far is how do we ensure that our next generation, our younger people actually come through and can have a future on the family farm and by extension in thriving rural communities.
Are you concerned about any of the results from the recent polls?
Well, look, I mean, of course you watch the polls and it tells you your form at a given point in time. But the reality is that whatever the polls say, we still have a job to do and an obligation to speak to people very directly, to set out our plans, whether it's in housing, which we've done comprehensively, or childcare, which we have a marvellous proposal for €10 childcare per child per day, or whether it's on the issues of sustainable agriculture or rural development or whatever. And you plough on with that. I mean, there's no job on earth, and farmers know this, maybe better than anyone else, where you get it all your own way and you get it easy all of the time. That's just not reality. So you meet a challenge, you face the challenge, you face into it, and you plough on.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy.
Thanks for that, Francis, speaking to Deputy Mary Lou McDonald there a little earlier at the Agriland tent. You're very welcome into the live stream. Day 2 of the ploughing here in Ratheniska in County Laois, and the sun has held again today. I see a few scalded and burnt foreheads and shoulders already, so I hope you brought sunscreen. But our first panel of the day, I have a variety of people joining me on the panel today, and we're going to talk about the issues from the ground up. So we're going to discuss what the challenges are, what you, the farmer at home, or the contractor, the advisor, are experiencing, and the challenges and I suppose opportunities that might be in the farming industry at the moment. Firstly, I'm joined by John Joe Fitzgerald from the Irish Nature and Hill Farmers Association. Michael Maroney is here with us from the Association of Farm and Forestry Contractors of Ireland. And I'm also joined by Julian Pawlowski. You're an agricultural advisor yourself, specialising in organics, but you're also a member of the ACA. Thank you for joining me, gentlemen, today. So first of all, John Joe, I might go to you in terms of the INHFA. What are some of the prominent issues? I'd say most people can probably predict what you're going to say when it comes to the INHFA, but the most prominent issues, particularly for hill farmers at the moment?
At the moment, I suppose, it's acres. You know, it's been a shambles from start to finish. And I suppose, like, with the interim payments and everything else, and even speaking to advisors yesterday, The landscape actions and commonages, they need to publish those straight away. We need them as farmers, the advisors need them, and it needs to get out there, and we need to work on it. Because if we come to the end of the acre scheme and all this money is not spent, for the next cap we might be able to draw that money down. So that's a big problem at the moment, I suppose. And the next thing after that would be costs. The rising costs all the time. I know the price of sheep at the moment are good, and cattle, lambs, but it's the costs associated with those to bring them through the winter, keep the ewe on the hill or on the land, and to have the lamb survive, I suppose, right up until you sell it. Now, there's a good price for the lamb, as I say, at the moment, but that, the costs have eaten into that. And I suppose weather, the stress of the weather, it's been raining, I suppose, from last July 23 right up to not too long ago. That's creating fierce stress for farmers. And I suppose on top of that then you have schemes, the red tape to deal with schemes, and the paperwork that follows it. It's driving farmers cuckoo is the only way to describe it. I suppose on top of that then, the rising number of TB reactors at the moment, in the country. We held a meeting there in Dingle just over a week ago. We had the department down. They need to do a lot more of those meetings out throughout the country. And it was a learning curve for the farmers of the night. They went home with actions that they could do on their own farms to help them not to bring the TB in. And I suppose we move on from there. Then I suppose succession, a big issue, and especially for us hill farmers. Where are we going to find the next generation that want to go on the hills farming? And it's a worrying trend, and on top of that, like I come from West Kerry myself, we see 90 or 95% of the youth emigrating every year. Now, what does the future hold for us if we can get some of those to come back?
Yeah.
And that's the worrying trend. And, if they're gone abroad, all right, we do well in the tourism industry down there, but tourism is not the end-all and be-all of everything. And the cost, I suppose, of building a house, especially in West Kerry, a 3-bedroom house, you're talking between 350,000 and 400,000. And
well, that's if you can get the planning permission in the first place, John Joe, to be honest with you.
Exactly. And a lot of those little issues that are playing in people's mind all the time.
Yeah. Michael Maroney, I'll come to you in terms of contractors. They've had a lot of challenges that they've had to deal with as well over the last 12 months, in particular with weather and work schedules. Similar challenges, but obviously in a different way to what the farmers on the ground themselves are experiencing.
Yeah, Stella, and thanks for having us here today. The biggest issue facing contractors are costs. Machinery costs have increased significantly, and repair costs, parts costs for machinery have even doubled, or even in excess of that again. So cost number one, the costs have increased. It's been very difficult from that point of view. And a lot of people are focused on the cost of diesel, and that's only a small percentage of the total cost. It's the machinery operation costs, it's the machinery purchasing costs that are far bigger costs, and machinery replacement costs.
But where are those costs coming from? Because farmer go into a dealer and, a machine that was priced at one price 12 months ago, it's gone up now, the same machine, and they can't really understand who's filtering down those costs. Where's that coming from ultimately? Well,
our impression is that it's coming from the manufacturers at that level. But I mean, we can't control that, but we're faced with a situation where costs are enormous, have increased significantly. Like we're talking about €1,000 per horsepower at this stage. So you're 150 horsepower.
€1,000 per HP?
Yes, so you're looking at 100 horsepower, 150 horsepower tractor at €150,000. So that's a very significant increase in a relatively short period of time. There are other issues. It's not just that issue. Certainty on farms, there's a lot of uncertainty. And the whole issue about fertiliser use and irrigation, nutrient management plans has resulted in people in many farms not knowing how much fertiliser they can apply. And that has an impact on crop yields. And then in turn, it has an impact on the work our members do, because yields are less, returns are less, and areas to be worked are a little bit less. So that's starting to have an effect. And if you take a year like last year, where fertiliser use was less, this year some of those soils didn't get a top-up of fertiliser, so returns have been less. And as a consequence of that, we've lots of talk about a fodder crisis or a potential fodder crisis. But in each of those cases, it impacts on the ability of our members to deliver for farmers because of the yields. The other issues related to calendar farming, and most farmers are aware of it. You know, from a point of view of an agricultural contractor, we tend to be SMEs, we're small businesses based in rural areas, delivering services to farming. But at each time that calendar reduces, our ability to employ and retain skillful people is gone. So if our season for work is reduced by 4 months, that's 1/3 of the year. So how do you employ somebody when you have no work for 1/3 of their year? Making it very difficult to retain skills that are invaluable and skills that deliver technology benefits onto farms. So they're priority issues as far as we are concerned. This year, a little bit difficult, very late spring. A lot of pressure on contractors to get work done, you know, at a short, like where people sowing spring barley in the month of May. And the end result of that is, as a consequence of that, we have a situation whereby the harvest is late. And now we have this 14-day rule in terms of cultivation, and virtually impossible to deliver what's needed in terms of that under the circumstances. So we have asked the Minister, for example, this week to extend the slurry spreading dates and to use the technology that's there with Teagasc, and there is an agreed protocol in terms of methane data, grass data, etc. And we should be able to go past October 1 for slurry spreading this year. There's nobody wants to spread slurry this week in the hope of having grass when grass has been really slow. But you're going to be restricted to October 1, so we need that to be extended. And these are practical things where contractors and our own SCI members can deliver for Irish farmers.
Absolutely. And I'll just go to Julian Pawlowski there. You're an agricultural advisor. You work across the country, Julian, I suppose, and you work with your colleagues as well in the ACA. From an advisor point of view, I mean, every step along the chain is having challenges and issues. I mean, when people think, you know, there's a real sort of heavy shoulder on farming at the minute, it's not just farmers. The spin-out industry from agricultural production in this country is huge, and that includes advisors.
Absolutely, yeah, it pushes on massively. I mean, in my job at the moment, I travel the country wide. I work as the organic specialist with the ACA, so I do a lot of KT meetings and things with advisors. So you get a good intel into what they're seeing day to day. And the common theme is just sheer workload at the moment. You scheme after scheme after scheme, deadline after deadline, and to try and meet those is really difficult. And I think at the moment the main problem is within the Department of Agriculture, if they're putting out a scheme, there doesn't seem to be a lot of, I suppose, discussion between departments within the department. So we may end up with 3 different schemes within a week with a closing deadline, and you're trying to get as many clients into that as possible. Maybe people are missing out because of this, and then you get disgruntled farmers coming back towards you. So I suppose the sheer workload on an agricultural advisor can impact right the way down the whole way across the board for farmers as well.
And with some of these schemes, I mean, is there a general sense, to be honest, because there's definitely a sense of this among farmers, like the department, have they just put a lot of the carts before the horses here in these schemes?
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, you see only after a little bit of time whether something's worked or not. You know, some are a roaring success, and you see people moving from one to the other on the back of that. I know Acres this year, there seems to be a good dropout rate from Acres because they've gone through a year or 2 of it and gone, right, this isn't for me. It's not really what I thought it was or what I signed up to, and maybe moving into something like organics because it's more suitable for them. So, yeah, I suppose it's maybe a little bit more thought into what the scheme is and how it can be delivered, and is it achievable? You know, I mean, as advisors right here doing scorecards, the timeframes are just not achievable, you know, and there isn't really an opportunity there for us. A lot of us are self-employed, so we don't have the same luxury of maybe, you know, if you're sick for a week, you can't take it off. There's a deadline coming, you have to do it. So maybe a bit more of a look into force majeure or what that would look like for us as well, you know.
I understand what you're saying. And talking of timelines and deadlines and Acres scheme there, we were happy to hear, John Joe, today, the opening of the applications for the NPIs for Acres, the non-productive investments. However, farmers are still waiting for the decisions on the ones from 2023.
It is, and even with the landscape actions there that we're going to do on commonages, we still haven't got the list of what we're supposed to do. And, you know, the time frame is short. We're moving in now to the 3rd year of it. And some of these actions we mightn't be allowed to do, you know, when the close period comes there for burning and for cutting hedges and everything else. So, like, there needs to be a bit more proactiveness with the department. You know, they need to put the resources in if they want to deliver in this. Like the farmers there, he's willing to stand up, be counted. He's paid the money out, to get into the scheme and stuff. But I think the backward approach of the department, it leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah. And just talking about cash flow, Michael, cash flow is something that we focused on a lot at the moment, particularly this time of year now. It's tight for farmers. But if cash flow is tight for farmers, cash flow is tight for contractors.
It is, and it's always, there's a couple of months that are difficult months in terms of our sector. April is a particularly difficult month in terms of cash flow, but just to put into context, like if you look at the Teagasc National Farm Survey at the moment, the amount spent on contractor services in 2023 was the highest ever, €7,340 per farm on average. Now, obviously, on different farms it was higher and some was lower on some of the smaller livestock farms. But what's interesting, if you look at a trend over the last 15 years, that's still 14% of direct costs on farms. So while the cost for the contractor, the cost for the farmer have gone up, but the contractor is still able to deliver exceptional value onto a farm at 14% of costs, despite having to cope with very significant costs of equipment and now with labour costs. But I think it's important as well is that, this should be a time of opportunity for agriculture, but it's been confused and made complicated by, I would say, so many schemes that farmers don't know what decisions to make, and that's now impacting on us. For example, yesterday evening, I was for the first time made aware there's a national farm scheme run by the National Parks and Wildlife Service. So here's another government body running a scheme to conflict with acres. And they were almost telling us, not directly, well, we're better than acres. So why should one department be trying to outsell another department to offer a scheme that nobody fully understands?
Yeah.
So all that confusion is making it very difficult for farmers to make decisions, and it's obviously making it difficult for young people to look at agriculture as a career. It's too complex to farm today. They need to make it easier.
Well, I suppose, Julian, you know more than most how complex it is, because I'd say you're in and out of meetings on new schemes every day and trying to get the information back to farmers, and they're asking more questions and you're only getting the information.
Yeah, it's constant, it's non-stop, you have queries all the time, a scheme is announced, you mightn't even have heard of it yet, and you're getting a phone call saying, what about this, or, is it possible for me to go into this? I suppose it was touched on there as well. I mean, we're in a sector where there's a lack of young people. I'm a young professional in the sector, newly into it. I'm 2 or 3 years advising as an advisor and a few years working in the sector in general. But it's a hard sell at the moment to say to somebody, do you want to work a job that's 7 days a week? You don't get a lot of thanks for a lot of the time, So, you're going to see down the road as well a kick on from that. You're going to struggle to get young people coming out of college. Why would they choose maybe an advisor route when there's maybe an easier option out there in the agri sector even,
I see what you mean. And just before we finish up now, I'm conscious of the time, but within the circle that I'm making around you at the moment, as part of a supply chain in agricultural production, Michael can work with John Joe and his cohorts and farmers. You work every day, Julian, with farmers, and probably, you can all work together. So, I mean, call a spade, and what's the common denominator here? Like, it's just, is it just a lack of resources and inefficiency on the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
that seems to be a unanimous agreement here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but there's not joined up thinking on some of these things. It's too complex for people at the moment.
It is very complex.
And then we're adding costs. For example, at the end of this year, you're looking at a tyre recycling scheme and to include tractor tyres, for example. That will cost a contractor about €300 to send just in a levy to change the tyres, on top of the huge cost of tyres in the first place. So the whole industry needs to be aware, like we're loading costs onto a sector. We've now become a high-cost agricultural economy, not because farmers are doing anything wrong, but we have become that. So it's very difficult to retain profitability in a situation where we've become very high cost. And a lot of the costs are come from outside of farmers' gates, but farming has to live with them. Yeah. And then we're, as contractors, we're probably the closest link with many farmers, because in our situation, on average, a contractor will work on 3 farms a day.
Yeah.
So if you take 6 days a week and say 1,500 people in it, like multiply it up, our members will have contact with they'll have about 800,000 contacts with their farms throughout the year.
Yeah.
Really, really close. The profitability of the farm is very linked to the profitability of the contracting business. We can't live without each other. But certainly at a time of high cost and complexity, it's not very helpful.
Absolutely, and I'm sorry we have to leave it there. We're just a bit tight for time today, but a very interesting discussion from all three. John Joe Fitzgerald from the INHFA, Michael Maroney from the FCI, and Julian Pavlovsky, an ACA member and organic advisor. Thank you very much for joining us on our panel today. I think it's time to go back out to the ploughing and see who we're talking to next.
A solution hasn't been agreed yet, but it is being worked on, and the Minister for Finance has put forward proposals in relation to this. Look, my party's position is clear and not surprising to anybody at all. I believe in residential zone land tax. I don't support the idea of land hoarding. There is a housing crisis, it is real, and we need to activate land that is owned. I don't believe an active farmer is a land hoarder, and the law needs to understand the difference. Now, whether that's how we resolve that, I'm open to ideas and I'm open to suggestions, but it does need to be resolved. And government needs to be able to do two things at the same time. Bring in a residential zone land tax to tackle land hoarding as is outlined in Housing for All, and also support active farmers. Now let's bear in mind the government announced in the last budget that the Department of Finance would work on this and bring forward proposals. They need to do that now.
So welcome to day 2 of the 2024 National Ploughing Championships here at Ratheniska. For generations before Fendt, Massey Ferguson, John Deere tractors were ever dreamt of, real horsepower ploughed the fields of Ireland. Millions of acres were ploughed using pairs of horses every year. And horse ploughing, the competition classes here at Ratheniska, remains so popular. And I'm here now with Jerry North from County Offaly. And Jerry, tell us a little bit about your own experience of horse ploughing and how you actually got involved with the sport.
Well, sure. I remember my father ploughing with the horses, so I do. And of course then, sadly, the tractor came in and eliminated the horses. And for years I didn't have any horses, but eventually I got back into them, so I did. And then I met up with James Coffey from Roscommon and we started ploughing together. And for the last few years now we've been at it, so we have not winning any medals, mind you, but however, we're ploughing and we're here doing it. So that's the reason I'm at it. I like it.
And the two horses, the pair of horses you have here with you today.
Yeah, that's Sonny and Rooney. They're about, one lad is 13, the other fella's 12. And I have plenty of experience, but of course, the practice is what it's all about, you know. And sure, we're kind of divided, so it's hard to get time to do all the practicing, but we do enough to get by, you know.
And how long does it take to train a horse to plough proficiently, or a pair of horses to plough proficiently?
Well, to get them going at a nice steady pace and everything, you could be actually 12 months at them. Everyone will tell you you'll train a horse in 6 weeks. You will, you'll break him and you'll ride him in 6 weeks, but to get him to work, to teach him everything, you'll be at him for the 12 months. Long ago when my father was training him, he'd start off with a year and a half and he'd start the ploughing, and by the end of the growing season he'd have him trained ready to go. He'd have everything done at that stage, hay drew, corn coat and all, so it was a year-long process to get him the way I wanted him.
And these horses, what are they? What's their breed?
Well, there'd be a good bit of Clyde in them, but they'd be mixed, they'd be bred down from different things, because the Irish farmer didn't like a real big horse, he liked it a cob, because first of all they were easy fed, and second of all they hadn't got huge big feet, so when they were working them in the drills afterwards, they weren't walking on the crops, whereas the Clydesdale or the Shire had huge feet and they were walking on the crops, so the horse with the smaller feet worked out better, you know.
And you're happy enough with the conditions here this week?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely ideal. Okay, everybody's saying the ground's a bit hard, but I mean last year it was muck, so you can't have it everywhere. So it's ideal. Should look at everyone's enjoying themselves and it's grand and dry and fine. Very good.
Good stuff. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking...
We're in a grand spot this year. Last year we were off out a long way away and the lie diggers were the same. They were under a ditch. This year we're near the crowd. You can see all the people that's around us here having a look. So the spectators are getting a chance to have a look as well.
Great stuff. Thanks
Fair
for
play.
taking
You're more
the time
than
to speak
welcome. No
to me
bother.
today. And good luck for later in the day.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank
then.
you. All
Bye
right.
now. Bye.
Bye.
Well, rural housing is a big issue, and today walking around the show, the amount of people that have talked to me about rural housing and rural and sustainable communities is really key, and it's a key strong message coming here today at the Ploughing Championships. Look, I think what I've been calling for a long time is for the government to publish the rural housing guidelines, and they need to be published. Young people particularly who want to stay in rural communities, want to live there, they cannot stay in the family home. They cannot currently, many of them, get planning permission. They have no hope. So what's happening? They're leaving the land. They're leaving any chance of a future in agriculture. So it is a big, big issue, but I think it could be addressed by proper sustainable rural planning housing guidelines. And when I talk about sustainable, it's more than the environment. It has to be a profitable farming or the ability to work close by or off-farm payments. But people want to stay in their rural communities, understandably, and we've got to address the issue. And again, I'm calling for the government to publish, as they promised to do, the rural housing guidelines so people can make decisions about living and settling down in rural communities and possibly some one-off housing on farmlands that are in the family ownership.
And you're very welcome back to the Agriland tent here at the National Ploughing Championships. We're basked in glorious sunshine here in Ratheniska in County Laois. An absolutely glorious day. And the crowds are milling around here in the centre of the site. And we have more coming up now on our live stream because we're going to turn our attention to the topic of why food producers matter and what exactly their role is in the food chain and how perhaps we may strengthen that role. I'm delighted to be joined here on the panel by the CEO of the recently formed Agri-Food Regulator, that's Niamh Lenihan. Beside her is John Murray. John is a Board BIA Director of Sectors, and Roy Galley is to his left, who is of course Chair of the IFA National Pigs Committee. You're all very welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us, coming in out of the sunshine. Niamh, I'm going to start with yourself. The Agri-Food Regulator, it is something I suppose that has sparked the interest of so many farmers out there. We've craved within the sector for so long for transparency, for fairness. Can you tell us initially, what is the remit of the regulator? What is the parameters within which you're working at the moment?
So thank you. And look, really appreciative to Agriland to be here. I'm delighted to be here and on the panel. So what was the Agri-Food Regulator set up to do? Well, it has many functions, but there's two particular functions that are central to its work. So one is the enforcement authority for the unfair trading practices. So we have a list of unfair trading practices that are prohibited in all circumstances. There's 10 of those, a further 6 that are prohibited unless expressly agreed between a buyer and a seller, a buyer and a supplier, and we are responsible for enforcing compliance with those rules. So they include payment periods, a ban against unilateral change of contract, etc., with between businesses along the supply chain. I suppose there has been more interest since establishment about our price and market analysis. So what we've been asked to do under the legislation is to publish analysis of information about price and market data. So our remit is to work with businesses all along the supply chain and basically to improve transparency, and in turn we're looking at price formation mechanisms in that.
Okay, so we did hear word that you have been obviously working very, very hard. You've been engaging, as you said, all along the supply chain. But unfortunately, when it comes to maybe the first report that you were hoping to look at in the egg sector, maybe not as much cooperation as you were hoping for, unfortunately, there.
Yeah, we reached out earlier this year in terms of our first sector to look at, if you like, the egg sector. We have a board, delighted to have Joe Healy as our chairperson as well. And the board had decided on a certain approach in terms of we're looking at information that's publicly available in the first instance on different sectors and looking to supplement that as appropriate with private information, so information that we could provide or be submitted from businesses.
Which is probably what the industry is craving, Niamh.
Absolutely. So what we're trying to do is work with businesses in the supply chain to fill those gaps, essentially. So we reached out to the main players in the egg supply And there was, I have to say, there was very good engagement. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, a number of retailers, although they engaged, they didn't provide the information required. And last week, the board had recommended and wrote to the Minister to recommend that additional powers be supplied or provided to the regulator to enable us carry out that role.
Did you find that surprising? Did you find it disappointing, frustrating that the retailers weren't prepared to engage with the level of power that you currently have under legislation, Niamh?
Yeah, well, look, of course I'm disappointed. I mean, we set out with our best foot forward. We had a lot of engagement. And as I say, it's important to say there was very positive engagement on the ground, and many businesses put their best foot forward in terms of providing us with this sensitive information. And look, we're working with that relationship, obviously, and it'll evolve. Of course, I'm so disappointed that some retailers did not provide us the data.
Did they explain why, Niamh?
Well, there's a variety of reasons. That's up for them, to be honest. But I think the factor that we're looking at is, apart from building, of course, very strong relationships, the power that we have is to seek information, so we can compel anybody to provide it to us. And look, a lot of the issues that we're coming up against is in terms of, you know, how we would mine sensitive data, etc. So obviously we put our best foot forward in that a lot of businesses did provide information to us. So we're very satisfied that a satisfactory approach was taken in terms of dealing with businesses. But at the end of the day, the board did recommend that we provide, or that there's additional powers for us to compel businesses.
Okay, Roy Galley, I'm going to bring you in here, the IFA Pig Committee Chair. Transparency in our food chain and, I suppose, redistributing the power within the food chain is something that farmers have called for a very, very long time. Do you have faith that the agri-food regulator and the team there will be able to achieve that?
This is something that, yes, I'm passionate about, in that we need to have fairness right the way down the food chain, so that when we go to produce our food, that there's adequate recompense coming back to the farmer from the trade, if you like. And I think one of the things we're tackling at the moment is generational renewal. And that is an indicator of how resilient, if you like, the industry is and how attractive it is for young people to come into agriculture. And that revolves entirely around the profitability that's necessary within our sector to be able to produce food. Because don't forget, everybody here requires a farmer 3 times a day, if not more times a day. And as we get less and less of us, so there's now 230 pig farmers supplying this country with its entire amount of pig feed. So I'm responsible for feeding 100,000 people, if you like, as the average pig farmer. So when we get down to this and get the numbers get smaller and smaller, yet our population gets larger and larger, there is ever more importance upon the whole chain to work properly, so that Niamh's job is to make sure that this is fairness. So when something is, and one of the things that we've been sort of concentrating on, and I know Niamh can't tackle it, which is below cost selling. And I went into a butcher shop in a town where we were demonstrating some number of years ago when the pig farmers were in trouble. And he said to me, he says, I've got to have imported product on my shelf, because if I have Irish stuff on, I want to have Irish stuff on it. The retailers simply have a below-cost selling approach to that individual item, be it chicken or be it pork, whatever it is, and everybody goes off there and buys their product in there, leaving me with all my stuff on my shelf.
So he's losing
and that's
business.
non-sustainable. That's you know, as a thing. So that's one of the areas that we need to. And I see Ursula von der Leyen has brought this into her new program for government. So I'm hoping that UNIV can have a little bit more say on the sort of practice of below-cost selling.
Fingers crossed. John, I'm going to bring you in here. From a Board BA point of view, obviously you market Irish produce right around the world and developing into new markets and everything like that. But I suppose the role of the food producer within that supply chain, that's obviously key. You need the farmers on the ground to be producing the excellent food that you can market right around the world.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, we still export 90% of our beef, over 95% of our dairy, a high proportion of our lamb, and a number of other products. And the cornerstone to that promotion is the story of Irish agricultural production, which is totally embedded in the family farm model that we have, and it underpins all of that narrative. It gives that connotation of quality, but we back that up with the verification systems that we put in place, and certainly that has been instrumental in terms of opening the doors and maintaining those doors with quality customers around the world.
And I know obviously labelling is a huge issue as well in terms of traceability, and to make sure that we have, the products that consumers are buying, that they can be assured that it is Irish. You feel that that's robust enough at the moment, that consumers, we do see cases from time to time where things happen along the way?
Yeah, look, I mean, I absolutely. I mean, it is a big industry, and we need to be constantly vigilant and constantly monitoring this. But assurance for the consumer is fundamentally the thing we need to remember, and that is. From my mind, that's always where the retailer is, or the food service customer is. They're thinking about that brand trust, and that trust is embedded in not making mistakes for your consumer, because consumers are very unforgiving if you make a mistake there. So traceability has to be at a really, really high level, and if you don't comply, or if you don't make that, it does impact loyalty from a consumer point of view.
Well, we hear all the time that proof points that consumers don't accept just the top line facts anymore. They want they're very I suppose aware, they're educated, and they won't accept that.
Absolutely, and we see that with our quality assurance mark in the domestic market, that has a really, really high resonance with consumers. Actually, it's one of the highest brand awareness mechanisms in the market versus all of the other pieces that are out there, and consumers put a huge amount of trust in that and look for it, and that is why we see then retailers or others coming in looking to try and stock that in themselves, because it gives an instant recognition for them.
Niamh, I'm going to come back to you. The agri-food regulator in July announced that you had instigated legal proceedings against a business. Can you tell us any more about that case at the moment, and are we likely to see more following?
Well, it's ongoing, so I'm not going to comment on that case. But what I would say is that we are very active on the ground. So I talked about these unfair trading practices. So, for example, there's specific payment periods for perishable agri-food products, for example. And I think I just want to get the message out there. Well, two messages really. We're very active on the ground in terms of inspections on the ground, but obviously we can't inspect all agri-food businesses. So it's a partnership approach with suppliers on the ground where we really want to know if there's issues on the ground. So I've been very vocal about the door being open, where if you're experiencing an issue that you think could be a breach of an unfair trading practice, please come and talk to us. We're not expecting you to be experts on unfair trading practices. You can come and talk to us in confidence, so you can remain anonymous, and just give us the information, and we can talk that through with you.
Yeah. You had the egg sector report very briefly. Where are you going next?
We're working on horticulture and a couple of other sectors in the background, yeah.
Excellent, that's fantastic. We're going to leave it there. Niamh Lenihan, the CEO of the Agri-Food Regulator, John Murray, Board BIA Director of Sectors, and Roy Galley, the IFA Pig Committee Chair. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to head back out into the field now in Ratheniska and enjoy some more sunshine.
I'm Louise from Agriland, and I'm joined here today by Sergeant Graham Kavanagh and IFA Crime Executive Officer Barry Carey. Sergeant, I'll start with yourself. What are the crime trends that we're seeing this year? Would you say that there's an increase?
Yeah, well, we are seeing an increase, but we put a lot of it down to the fact that people are actually reporting things better to us. That was something we always wanted people in the rural community to do, was report issues, report crime. And the types of thing we're seeing, and Barry will speak about it, is that the usual quads, trailers, tools like that being stolen. And we've also noticed there over the last couple of years the instance of the GPS tracking units from tractors being stolen. And Barry will talk about that as well. But I suppose the encouraging thing for us is that, yes, we are seeing an increase, but we also put it down to the fact that that's people engaging and reporting and engaging with the guards in their community.
And is there a particular area that there's been more crime this year?
No, as in county-wise, no. Like, I look after Laois and Offaly, so there's one of me in every Garda division. So we'd see sometimes there might be pockets where travelling criminal gangs might pass through areas and target areas, but there's no area that has I suppose, been untouched when it comes to crime, you know. And then it's the whole knock-on for the mental health it causes for victims when they are victims of crime.
And just on that mental health, Barry, what type of impacts is it having on farmers?
Well, a recent survey conducted with Technological University of Dublin in relation to these issues, and it's the fear of crime that has the most impact. It's not actually being the victim of crime, but the fear of crime has a huge impact on people. And as Graham alluded to, there are pockets where travelling criminals have gone into areas. And the trends over the last year, and particularly since the Ukrainian war started, that there's now a corridor of agri-equipment which has been an embargo against Russia, and England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, Ireland have become the target areas for agricultural equipment, particularly GPS systems. And there's been several areas of this that have happened. And there's also the area of trespass and illegal hunting, which Graham will speak about also. And this is about threats and intimidation of IFA and agricultural and rural dwellers in relation to people coming onto their lands with dogs during lambing calving season, and that has a huge impact on the farming community also.
And what would be the advice to farmers then to try and prevent crime? I know it shouldn't be up to them, but what would be the general advice?
Well, yeah, I suppose crime prevention is everybody's business. It's not just the guards, it's the owners. So there's loads of advice about securing your property marking, the property app, the type of crime that we're talking about where GPS tracking units, having the tractor in, I suppose, a secure perimeter area that you know when there's activity going on there that you can see it. And there also is a responsibility on the manufacturers as well. I mean, if you're producing a very valuable piece of equipment, there should be an onus on the manufacturer to, I suppose, help law enforcement, if they are stolen, to be able to locate these items. With the property app, which, we cannot ask people enough to take an inventory of what they own and mark it. So we have property marking machines in nearly every Garda division, supported by the local authorities and the public participation networks, is to work with your local guards or your local community policing teams or your local crime prevention officers, because I always say this, we live in your communities too. We're not, it's not like we disappear and we don't see the issues, and it's in our interests, I suppose, drive it down and keep people out of our area, So it's working together to continue what we've always tried to do well and continue that, And the other thing, I suppose, and I'm not going to get controversial, we have these conversations with the different farmer representative bodies about, I suppose, trespassing on people's lands. And that's a conversation piece that has to be had with other stakeholders in Ireland, that people seem to think that they're perfectly entitled to come onto people's farmland with their dogs and trespass or to create harm or cause harm to wildlife, And that's, I suppose, a message that we really need to get out to people in communities that think that that's fine. It's not. It's illegal. And your activities cause stress for people. And I hear these stories every other week. And I have pockets in my own division that this happens in, So we kind of need to have that conversation and call a stop to it.
Thanks very much for that.
Welcome back to the live podcast version of Ploughing Day 2 at the Agriland stand at 289 here, right in the heart of the ploughing site in Ratheniska. Forgive us, you might hear some noise in the background there. Of course, that's just the PA announcement system here at the ploughing site, just giving out a bit of safety information and so on. So if you hear that in the background, please forgive us. But today on our live podcast, we are joined by Minister of State Pippa Hackett and Minister of State Martin Hayden from the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. Thank you, Ministers, for joining us today on this lovely sunny Wednesday in Ratheniska. Firstly, I might go to yourself. Minister Pippa Hackett, one of your portfolios is for organics, as we all know. Today, a national organics strategy will be launched here at the ploughing. And I suppose, what will that do in terms of a way forward for, number one, organic farmers, and number two, people considering moving into organic farming?
Firstly, it's really exciting to be here. Great crowd here, and I'm sure they're here to listen to us and not just the merchandise. But anyway, look, I think I think the significance of the strategy really reflects the effort that has gone into the organic sector over the last 4.5 years since this government was formed. We very much made it a priority, and I suppose the importance now that this strategy signals is that it's going to continue to be a priority for future governments. It's very much a priority at the EU level, and in Ireland over the last 4 years, we've seen a significant increase not only in the number of farmers farming organically. We've gone from about 1,600 to 5,000 now, but also the area of land under organic production. So I think the hard work that has gone into that from the sector as a whole, and from the state agencies, and from my department, and from government colleagues, is a testament to where we are now and what we can see in the future for organic farming. So I think it's a really exciting time, because as most people know, and organics, I mean, the word I heard 5 years ago was niche. I haven't heard that word referenced in relation to organic since. So it's very much becoming more part of the overall, if you like, offering of agriculture in Ireland. And I think there's an excitement there. There's enthusiasm among the farmers getting involved. There's enthusiasm among food producers and the processors. So I think all in all, it's an exciting time. It's an important piece of the jigsaw in our overall sustainability. Organics delivers for pretty much every box that you might need to tick on the sustainability list. And, we see a younger cohort of farmers coming in, maybe more female farmers. So I think it's the start of something really special.
And what about the market there for organics? I suppose that has come up consistently, and what makes some farmers apprehensive is that, I suppose, if you get into a sector or into an area, no more than any business plan, you want to make sure that the market is there so that you can make it profitable for yourself.
Yeah, you're right, and that has been maybe a criticism of the sector. I might add, from mainly of those people who might not be interested in organics, choose to pick on it, but from the work that Board Bia have been doing over the last couple of years, they've appointed a standalone organic sector manager that we've a state have invested in Board Bia to support that. From between Board Bia and the processors, and any processor I speak to, whether they're beef, sheep, tillage demand, even for animal feed or human food, there is a demand there, and we can fill it. We can fill it domestically and for the European market. I've not met anyone who said, I'm a bit worried that we're going to, any of the processors or Board Bia, that we're going to flood the market or anything like that. There is a price. Look, you're not going to be a millionaire out of organic farming, nor are you going to be a millionaire out of any farming enterprise. But it is a sustainable way to do it. You do reduce your input costs. You take back some control on your farm, and that's always something that attracted me to it, and me on my farm. You have a little bit more control there. And I think
you mentioned that before. That was one of the off
and
points.
with that, you're controlling your input costs very much, and you're thinking about next, 6 months down the line or next year what you'll be doing with your field. So with that comes, I suppose, a renewed sense of excitement. And I think, as I said, from farm to fork, there's opportunities the whole way along that supply chain.
And I suppose when we're talking about markets, one of your portfolios within DAFM, Minister Martin Hayden, is new market development. You've just come back from the Far East, where you were there on a trade mission, lauding the merits of all things Irish produce. And it's amazing to see Irish produce on the shelves in South Korean supermarkets, for example. What other potential markets are coming down the line that might give some optimism to farmers, be it whatever sector, dairy or beef, in the near future?
Yes, Stella, look, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honour to be here with you in Agriland today. I suppose the way I look at it is the responsibility we have in the Department of Agriculture is to gain access to markets worldwide for all of the food and drink produce that our farmers are producing, that our Irish food companies then sell and look for markets for. If you take the area of Korea, where I visited 18 months ago for St. Patrick's Day to try and help gain market access for our beef at that time, where we have some other produce already there available, you see the success of Flavin Oats and the market that they've carved out there. It really is important. But after much extensive work, we finally got access for beef to Korea. It's a different market than China or Japan. There's a high level of consumption of beef there already. They're only 40% self-sustainable with their own Hanwoo beef. and the majority of what they import is Australian or American. There's no really South American beef there. And they're acutely conscious of a dependency on the Australian beef that could be impacted by drought in the future. So there's a real desire to diversify in their food service element in particular and to grow that market. And the really exciting thing in that area is the fact that it's a population of 50 million people and they have a very similar kind of approach to ourselves. So that opportunity is there, and as well the fact that the access we got eventually, while it took time, was much broader than, let's say, we have in China, which China is very specifically, the spec is below 30 months, boneless frozen. In terms of Korea, it's below 30 months, bone in, bone out, and offal as well, which again, these are markets that would pay substantially for that in that area. But in terms of dairy, in terms of beef of sheep, of pork, of poultry, and fish is a growing area, and then the whole area of Irish whiskey. We were seeing a renaissance in our Irish whiskey sector where in 1991, this country, we had 4 distilleries. Now we have up on 45, and they're using, Irish produce from our farms, and we have the whole tourism benefit here in terms of raising that profile. But the main point I'd make about access is it's not a failure if after a lot of work we gain market access for a certain Irish produce into a certain market and that's not filled. Because what we are doing is offering the widest range of market options for Irish food companies to get the best possible price for farmers' produce that they have produced themselves. Okay. And ultimately, that's what we continue to do to strive, particularly after Brexit, reduce our dependency on the UK market. Because the final point I'd make is our trade is kind of divided 3 ways with our agri-food sector. We export about a third of our produce, like beef and that, to the UK, a third to mainland Europe, and the other third is to the rest of Europe. And we want to diversify. While the UK is a really important market for us, they are open to doing deals with third countries. We need to reduce our dependency on that market and create more opportunities like we have for soft continental cheese and on Europe with the Tirlawn, Bellevue plant and others like that.
I'll go back to you, Minister Hackett, and I'm just conscious of the time now on our podcast today, but Budget 2025 is just around the corner. Yourselves, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil coalition partners devising that budget, and particularly with the environmental side of things, the farmers want to do it. They want to undertake all of these new farming practices and methodologies. So you're not going to tell me, I know, but what can the farmers expect from Budget 2025? Do you think they might be happy?
Look, I would hope so. I mean, we've worked really hard as a team in the department over the last number of years to provide for farmers and to give them options. At the end of the day, we can't force anyone to do anything, but the direction of government is to support sustainable practices. So I would like to see that the organic farming scheme will reopen. We'll be able to support farmers into that. I'd like to see funding for things like multi-species swards and red clover. I mean, they all, again, play a major role in supporting farmers to come off like fossil fuel-based fertilizers. And I think actually President Higgins put it nicely yesterday. I don't know if you heard his opening speech, but he said, and I wrote it down actually at the time, there is a wisdom in respect for nature. And I think people are being more aware of that. I mean, we're in the middle of this challenge now around the derogation and nitrates and water quality. That's all nature at work, and we have to be able to farm within those, as they call them, planetary boundaries. We have to be able to farm in line with nature so we don't damage nature, and if we can nurture it and restore it. So I think any measures that we can support as a government over the next, the remainder of this government and into future governments will be essential really for the whole outlook, I think, for Irish agriculture. But
I think, more than yourself, farming in your own organic system. I mean, I think a lot of farmers would feel that they do work alongside nature themselves. Even, old traditions and like pishogs and things, and how to get the best out of a particular meadow or a particular pasture, how to, understand the weather patterns, how to understand soil. So I think that the basis is already there. Farmers are nearly scientists in many ways themselves, and now it's just encouraging and supporting them to really take on the more modern
I think practices. So. I think there's a natural knowledge farmers have, especially in a farm that's been passed down through generations of, the damp spots.
Yes, of course, yeah.
But farmers also see changes in their farms over the decades and over the generations. And you mentioned things like pishogs and different,
that might be West Ireland
But
Sure,
well,
I don't
yes,
know,
but you know, but I mean, it's just, I mean, people have seen these things disappear from their farms, and I think there's a value as well in bringing that down through the generations. You know, from a grandparent maybe to a grandson or daughter, that we need to see those things back, and whatever we can do to support that, you know, when we start seeing the reappearance of things that have disappeared from our farms, we know we're starting to do it right. But obviously we have to produce food, and that's what we do greatly in this country. You know, we are an agrarian country, we're renowned for it. So, you know, build on all of those strengths, but you know, ultimately we do have to make sure nature is still there.
Yeah. And Minister Hayden, I might just come back to you on another element of your portfolio, which is the farm safety, I suppose, and health and well-being. We're still seeing accidents around the country. Some of them near misses, some of them, you know, dangerous, and others tragic. And are we doing enough? We're still a very dangerous sector in terms of working in this country. You know, the data would show it's probably the most dangerous sector to work in. And are we doing enough? And particularly, I don't want to focus on the physical things like machinery and being careful, but also the mental health, because farmers are under so much stress as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I've been really keen when I got a farm safety, a farmer mental health and wellbeing budget established within the Department of Agriculture during my term, a budget that will always be there now. Woe betide any politician in the future that tries to cut that or get rid of it. We have it established. I've been able to fund and support a number of local partnership EIP projects that have worked around that area of peer-to-peer support, helping farmers and helping communities identify where farmers are in distress and need help. And I'm really encouraged this week at the Ploughing about the amount of times at stalls with the Farmers' Eve services yesterday, different initiatives that are taking place, even different farming organisations having different schemes there, addressing and talking about the issue of farm mental health. I think 5-10 years ago you wouldn't have got that at the Ploughing as much.
No,
so we are progressing. Yeah. It's easier to talk about and people to be aware that it's okay not to feel okay and to seek help. On the farm safety side, in terms of this budget, I'm really proud that I've made it easier for farmers to invest in making their farm safer. We have to change the culture, and we are making progress. I'm slow to talk about progress because one fatality is one too many, but 6 fatalities at this time of the year is lower than it would have been in other years. It's still 6 too many, but I do think that we are making inroads on addressing that issue of our culture of risk. But I want to do more. I was really proud to get the 60% TAMS grant for farm safety measures, again, to encourage farmers to make those investments. And I believe there's more we can do in the upcoming budget to, again, incentivise and support farmers who invest in making their farm safer. And particularly in the context of the challenges we have around labour availability, older farmers doing jobs. You know, we can make investments on our animal handling facilities and other areas that can make it much easier. And that'll be a key priority for me in the budget.
Perfect. Well, I'm being told here we're running out of time yet again, but thank you very much to Minister Pippa Hackett and Minister Martin Hayden from the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine for joining us on our Day 2 Ploughing podcast, live here from the Agriland stand at 289 on row 15. We're going to go back outside to the site again, out into the sunshine to our team of reporters, but stay tuned to us and we'll be back again shortly.
I'm Colin with Agriland. I'm here with Brian Walsh. He's a hurley maker from Enniscorthy in County Wexford. Brian, you're having a busy few days here at the Ploughing. What's the trade like today?
Fantastic. The weather is bringing the people out in their droves. So, as I said to you, it's compared to last year, as I said to you, there's more footfall, and especially yesterday. And hopefully today, like Wednesday is usually the busiest day, so hopefully it's up again today.
And how long have you been making hurls for, Brian?
Well, I started off in, as I said, back in the late 90s there. Wendy's father used to repair hurls that he used to hurl for Wexford there, so he did in the 60s. So I started off repairing hurls, and then I started making 1 or 2 for friends and stuff, and I just went from there, like, though, but I always had a passion for it. And as you know yourself, the amount of hurls that would have always come back to me to be repaired from all different hurley makers around the country, I never said no. It was business at the end of the day, you know.
And you don't only fix the hurls, you're making them. How many would you be making roughly a year? Do you know?
It all depends on the ash that's available. Like at the moment, like as you know yourself about the ash dieback disease, it's in Ireland. Like there's about maybe a small percentage of only Irish ash. The rest is all being sourced over Europe. So I say to you, so anyone that's really making 100% Irish ash is probably only making anywhere between 17 and 20 hurleys a week. Everything else has been imported.
And your own design then, Brian, kind of when did you kind of discover what was your particular style of a hurl?
Well, it's going back to when I was back in the day when the small boss was there. But what I done is say to you, I used to piece the hurls to make it bigger first. And at the time, I always remember doing a hurl for a certain inter-county player. And 2001, and they were playing in an All-Ireland under-21 final. And the boys went into training that night and they said, geez, are you using a goalkeeper hurl outfield? And from there then I just kept increasing the boss size. Like, you know, it was like a tennis racket at the time, like a longer handle, and I said, now it's gone a shorter handle in the hurley with a bigger boss.
And any players now that you can think of that might have their own specific designs, like any inter-county players that would be picky maybe?
There's a lot of picky inter-county players, and I say to camogie players as well, as I say to you. But it's vital to make sure it's like building a home. The most important part of it is the foundation, and the next generation of kids is very vital to me.
Oh, brilliant. Brian, thank you very much for speaking with us. I know you're flat out here for the 3 days of the ploughing, and best of luck with the trade down here.
No bother. Thanks, Colin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello folks, Breffney O'Brien here, and we're here today at Ploughing 2024, and this morning we're in the sheep tent. And now I'm joined by Thomas Elmore. Thomas, can you tell us a little bit about what you have here in the sheep tent at Ploughing 2024 today?
Good man, Breffney. What we have here is we have the North Country Cheviot breed here on the stand. It's our second year showing at the Ploughing, and we're back here again for another successful year in selling the breed.
Can you tell us a little bit about the traits of these North Country Cheviots, and are they a popular breed in Ireland as of now, Thomas?
Well, Breffney, they're becoming very, very important, and in the next couple of years they're probably going to become the most important harness hill breed in Ireland. Certainly if we have our way anyway. They're prolific.
And why is that? I suppose, why do you think that will be the case?
Well, they're hardy, they're versatile. They don't grow full size till a 5-year-old. They hold their teeth 8, 9, 10 years of age, and there's an average of 2 to 3 more crops of lambs out of them over their lifetime over more conventional hill sheep bred in Ireland.
And Thomas, you have these sheep. Tell us a little bit about where you keep them and how they perform in their environment.
Well, Breffney, I'm running them on a hard hill up in the Cooley Mountains, which is many hundred metres above sea level. We're running them on hard rocky hills with heather and small amounts of furze and grass, and we're getting very, very good results. We're scanning them into 140% average year on year, and that's good enough for us. Obviously there's other lads will run them on better ground, and on better ground they'll respond better. Some lads is reporting very, very, very good prolific results of up 180 to 200%.
And how do they, I suppose then, that's my next question, how do they perform in lowland systems, Thomas?
Well, in lowland systems, because they're a big frame animal, and because as the crops come out they grow bigger and bigger, they're fit to take feeding. And because of that, lads they're on better ground, again, they're able to respond better and give more prolificity. But we're happy enough with 140%. We are running them pretty hard, and we're trying to maintain the true traits that's in them of hard hill sheep. Fit to mother on their own, fit to go to the mountain with their lambs, fit to rear their lambs, and bring in a bit of a payday at the end of the year.
And I suppose, tell me a little bit about the way they're built, I suppose, as a breed to be able to withstand these hard conditions.
Well, they have, as you can see, they've wool on them. The wool is fairly tight, and they've been bred like that there down through the ages in Scotland and places like that there, and they're bred for a tight skin that's free draining of water in harsh conditions. These sheep are bred to perform on their own independently, and they're a bad-tempered sort. They like doing things on their own. They are independent, and it is what they're all about.
And Thomas, can you tell us a little bit about the ploughing? I suppose, how is it going, and what brought you down here of all the shows?
Well, I suppose this last number of years since I started running rams, across commercial ewes some 8-9 years ago. I knew the writing was on the wall for the commercial ewes I was running without running these here. So I diversified full into North Country Cheviot breeding, a bit of pedigree, but still run a bit of commercial as well. And the results in the first couple of years were phenomenal. We just kept going, and they're just getting better and better. The ploughing, I feel, is the ultimate platform to showcase this breed. People in Ireland especially need to know about it. They need to know about the traits of this breed. They need to know, that these sheep, they get more endearing, they get more catchy as the years go on. They're nice to be around, they're nice to work with, they're a very handy breed, they're milky, they're hardy, and they're prolific.
And are you getting many inquiries, I suppose, from the farmers that are here?
Yeah, the response we're getting here is absolutely phenomenal. And look, it is big statements to say that these are going to, but these sheep are becoming very, very important. And as far as I'm concerned, it's only proper order. This is the ultimate hill breed of the future for Irish farming.
Thank you very much, Thomas.
Thanks very much, Breffney.
And you're very welcome back here to the Agriland tent at the National Ploughing Championships in Ratheniska in County Laois. We're in the middle of day 2 and we're bringing you the latest in our series of live podcasts from the Agriland stage this week at the ploughing. And today we are focusing on talking about the future with young farmers. And of course, the issue of generational renewal, it has become very topical, particularly in recent times with the announcement by the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Charlie McConalogue, that he was going to establish a commission for generational renewal. But that's not all we're going to be talking about with our panel of young farmers. I'm delighted to be joined on the stage by Elaine Houlihan, the president of MACRA. Thank you so much for joining us. To her left, we have Donal Phelan, who is a young farmer who has benefited from MACRA's land mobility service. And beside him is Rob Lally, who's the young farmer from County Mayo. You're all very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us and coming in from the sunshine. Elaine, we couldn't get a much different ploughing than last year. By God, we were pushing cars out of car parks last year, and this year we're slapping on the sunscreen.
Completely. It's completely changed. I remember somebody asked me today when we were taking a photo, we're like, what should I wear? And I was like, it makes no difference, wear whatever, because last year it was waterproofs and wellies.
Yeah.
Like, it's so different, but the mood is just brilliant out there among people.
Yeah, because it has been a challenging year. I mean, it's a challenging year for farmers of all age groups, Elaine, and it's not to take from it. It's great, as you said, the atmosphere is buzzy here, but it has been a tricky year.
It's been an extremely challenging year, to be very honest. Like, we had the longest winter, we had a hard spring, and currently there's farmers out there that are in dire straits now on fodder again. We have a lot of our members currently feeding silage at night. Look, in my 28 years of existence, it was my first time ever seeing the back of our silage pit this winter.
Yeah.
It was the first time ever seeing the wall. So it's been extremely challenging. But look, in MACRA, we've been proactive. Rob sits on our Ag Affairs Committee. We're being extremely proactive, helping people with their fodder budget. We're also, I suppose, our big thing in MACRA is we're very mindful of people's mental health when it comes to all these challenging times for the farming community.
Absolutely. We might return to that in a little bit, but I suppose I did mention that we're talking about the future of farming, Elaine, and I know that you have a bunch of pre-budget asks, like all of the farm organisations. We're in that countdown to October 1st when Minister Jack Chambers is going to reveal how he's going to spend all of the taxpayers' money for next year. I'm imagining that succession, and that's something that MACRA has been very strong on. It might be something that other farm organisations have spoken on, but it is something that MACRA has been very keenly focused on when it comes to young farmers.
Yeah, no, completely. For the last decade, MACRA has been the one beating the drum for succession. We started the land mobility service and see how much that has helped young and old farmers. As we're saying to our government, we need support now around succession. We're after getting the Commission of Generation Renewal. Look, I'll be very honest with you, we welcome it. Do I have concerns about it? Yes, I do. Am I worried that it's going to be a political talking shop, especially with the election coming up? Certainly, because I feel if our government were going to take a more proactive approach on generation renewal, we would have the finer details of that commission, because that should be accelerated. We cannot wait to 2027.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do we have any template? Do we have any idea? We had an announcement.
Absolutely nothing. It was our first time hearing about it as I sat up in the band stage at Tullamore Show. That was the first time we heard that this commission was going to be put in place. Again, we cannot wait till 2027. We have to secure my generation's future in agriculture, to actually have a younger generation to actually take over farms, to ensure that we have a future in agriculture here in Ireland.
Young farmers are immigrating. They're leaving this country because they either feel they can't get into farming or they can't access land. And we'll talk about the work of the Land Mobility Service. But it is very stark out there for a lot of young farmers, and they're making those tough choices.
Yes, they are making them tough choices, because when you think of it, any career, if you go to college, the one thing when you're finished, you want to look into that crystal ball. You want to be able to say, okay, I have 10 years in this profession. For me, I'm also a physio. Like, I know that my job's secure. When it comes to farming, you look into that crystal ball and you're looking to see 2 years ahead. And people want to see that certainty. People want to see that there is viability in the sector to continue. They're not just going to Australia and Canada. They're also going to the cities. There's parents out there that are actively encouraging their children not to take over the family farm too, because they don't want their children to be burdened in the debt or the uncertainty that's around farming at the moment. Until we get concrete, I suppose, certainty, and once our government show that they are going to support us, it is vital in this budget that's been delivered by Minister Chambers that they show that they are supporting the farmers, because that is what we need right now. The farmers have always been here in Ireland to support Ireland, but we need support now back.
Okay, and before I talk to the lads, I'm just going to mention as well, of course, this is a live podcast. It's interactive here with the floor in Agriland in the tent. So we will be taking questions a little bit later on. So if anybody has any questions for our panel or wants to make a statement about the state of farming for young farmers in this country, we'd be delighted to hear from you. Donal, I'm going to bring you in here. Donal Phelan, you're farming down in Kilkenny.
Yeah.
You've availed of the Land Mobility Service.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your background firstly, and how you came to the Land Mobility Service.
We started with the Land Mobility Service. We done a contract rearing first on the home farm. There's about between 25 and 30 acres there, and that's how we came in contact with the Land Mobility. And then I got approached about the farm, and I said we'd go through the Land Mobility to do the lease and stuff like that on it.
So it works by partnering, say, a farmer like you who is looking for land with a farmer who may not have a successor. So in your case, it's Paddy Walsh.
Paddy Walsh,
yeah.
And we approached Land Mobility, and we done the lease. We drew it out. We talked it through. And they were very helpful in all the questions we had, and with Paddy. And Paddy was worried about what could happen and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a bit of trepidation, because I mean, you're not family, you're not connected, you're meeting a stranger essentially. And how did that dynamic work?
Yeah, no, it went well in fairness. And any questions we had, they had the answer. They knew. We had it all drew out on the lease and stuff like that. So it went well.
And tell us about the type of farming you're doing now with Paddy.
So doing a calf to beef system. We have a tillage, and I do a contract rearing as well, and I do a small bit of contracting on hire as well. So I do. Bring calves, we rear calves and bring them to beef, sell some of them as far as stores, bring the rest of them to beef. We're in the Beef 2020 Club. We have malt and barley, gluten-free oats, feed beans, and what's it? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, you've enough going on, it sounds like, to be honest with you. And I mean, obviously there's a lot of competition for land out there, don't we? We've heard it very often, of course. There's pressure from the dairy sector. We're trying to increase our forestry area. We're trying to increase our tillage area. But they're only making so much land. They're not making any more. That's really, that's the nuts and bolts of it. So essentially for you, if you didn't access the Land Mobility Service, what would have the future have been for you?
It wouldn't have been. As simple as that. There was no point in going out in the market for it.
Would you have left farming, do you think?
Probably would, yeah.
It's as stark as that?
Yeah, I probably, or else expanded on the contracting side of it.
Yeah.
And kept the contract rearing going at home. But I don't think I would have done any. I wouldn't have went out. I wouldn't have had a chance to go. I know. There's no.
And that's your passion. Like, I mean, farming is what you always wanted to do.
Yeah.
So
No different.
No different. This is it. Rob, I'm going to bring you in here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're farming in County Mayo.
Yeah, so I'm a beef farmer in County Mayo. We're finishing. So look, I understand the difficulties that are there. I'm very fortunate. I'm farming with my grandfather. We've a good herd of all Angus cattle. We started years ago as all Angus, but then once these bonuses came in, what we were kind of given for beef cattle, you know, you could throw a 200 or 300 on it, and that's what we were given for the same stock. I know you were getting it on the fair side, but with that inputs and everything increased. But yeah, so that's what I'm at full time. Yeah.
What's it like to be a young farmer in Ireland?
Contrary to the newspapers, it's great. It can be very, very difficult to drown out the negativity. But realistically, inside the farm gate, you know, it's a lonely place. It's a very lonely place when things aren't going right. And as Elaine touched on there, this year has been already full of challenges. But to be quite frank, we haven't seen the start of it as we go into this prolonged winter. So yes, not to pull away from the positivity of the day, there is always great barriers, but there is also there's equal opportunity. I would always be glass half full kind of a guy. And I do see great, opportunity for growth in particularly the western seaboard. Like I, for one, have seen the West completely forgotten from an infrastructure perspective, and that actually, has a negative impact on all of the farm organisations, but the farm gate, and more importantly, the farmer's wife might be gone,
Yeah.
So that's why it's vitally important to celebrate places or organisations like Machra.
Yeah, you need a vibrant community. It can't just be about the vibrancy inside the farm gate and the viability. There's more to a rural area, and we all know that coming from rural parts of Ireland.
Absolutely, and as you'll all be aware, look at Heller to Connacht. I'm still there, and as days go by, it gets more and more difficult. To stay around, to be the ones staying in the western side of the country. As a Claremorris man, I would be, I wouldn't be as far out as Achill or any of them places. But there is very, very unique challenges to that side of the country. And more importantly, as young farmers, the importance is viability and diversification. And if we can figure out a way to diversify beef farmers in this country, which is there's no silver bullet, but if you can't work 7 days a week, or 5 days a week on your farm, and that be your job, we need to relook at the situation. If you have to finish your part-time job on a Wednesday and go and try and squeeze a week's work into 3 days on your beef farm, and ask why there's so many accidents and difficulties coming up, and mental health because you forget to do one job that hits on to another thing, and this chain reaction of negativity and difficulty. And when you're by yourself in the farm, it's a very
that little
difficult
voice can get very loud, can't it, Rob?
And it absolutely does, and it just keeps growing.
You feel like you're the only one, and these things are only going wrong on my farm.
Absolutely,
and which isn't the truth in the vast majority of times.
And in Ireland, we're very, very focused on over-the-hedge farming. We're going to do what we need to do in order to look at our neighbours. We're not going to. It's not about reinventing the wheel; it's already there. But it's about how are we going to take these negatives, turn them into positives, and bear fruit,
And as you rightly said, Elaine, you were saying you saw the back of your silage pit. A lot of farmers saw that this year and probably were like, oh my God, have I done something wrong? And it's just circumstance. And this is the weather that we got. This is what we were thrown this year, unfortunately. But as Rob rightly says, there's a positivity. We need to make sure that young people want to come into this industry. There's plenty of other choices for young people when they go through school. They choose the leaving cert. They're going their CAO. They've all their different options to do. So farming, it has to really shine as an option for farmers.
No, it definitely has to shine as an option. It's up to us to show how resilient of an industry we actually truly are. I've been asked that question on every panel I've been at today. We have to showcase what's happening inside our farm gates. We have to show people the positives, but we also have to show them the negatives.
And the reality.
Yeah, that is the truth. We have to show the reality because we can all show this lovely picture, but we honestly have to show the reality of it. And it is up to us as the young people and the young farmers, like Donald and Rob here, that they need to showcase exactly what they're doing to show people that it is an attractive career. It is something that we can all stay in. It's a sector that we can remain in. Like for me, I went away, did physio. I know I can go back farming at home.
Yes.
That door is always open there for me. But it's now to show people that they can go into agriculture, they can go into farming, and they will have a future.
Well, we're not alone here in the tent. There's obviously a load of people in the audience. We're delighted to have them. But we're also joined by an award-winning farmer. Of course, that is Christopher Cahill, the 2024 FBD Young Farmer of the Year. Christopher, thank you so much for joining us here on the Agriland live stream here at the Ploughing Championships. Christopher, congratulations. And I suppose being a young farmer and now an award-winning young farmer, I'm sure you've lots to say about the future for farming.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the big thing is, you know, I've come from an agricultural background, so I've been exposed to it for you know, as long as I can remember. But you know, I don't think I can express enough how passionate I am about agriculture. Obviously, I've made a career on it, but most importantly, I think the opportunities that are in it for, you know, people at a farm level and people at an industry level, like it's nearly an industry like no other, the opportunities that are out there for young people. So yeah, it's something I'm really, really passionate about.
Can you tell us a little bit about your own farming system, Christopher?
Yeah, so I suppose we, as I mentioned, we come from a farming background. Both my father's brother and my uncle's, or my mum's brother, would have taken over the two family farms. So I would never have had a farm to go straight back to. So went and done an undergrad and a master's in UCD in agriculture and joined industry for a couple of years. And I suppose I always had the burning desire, if you want to call it that, to go and kind of farm in my own right. And in 2021, an opportunity arose with the Agriland Mobility Service, whereby Tony, my business partner, was an established dairy farmer. He was looking to take a backward step, and he has two daughters who weren't immediately interested in going full-time farming. So the two of us linked in with each other through the Land Mobility Service, and at the beginning of 2022, we established Dealside Farm, which is our farm partnership. And since then, it's been a busy 3 years, but it's been a very enjoyable 3 years. And we've expanded the business from initially milking about 110 cows to over 250 this year.
And winning the FBD Young Farmer of the Year, it's a huge honour, it's a huge accolade, and I've heard many people talking about it, the judges as well on the panel, huge praise for the standard and the quality, and a lot of people saying that the future is bright when we see entries and finalists like we had this year in this competition.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. For me personally, it's a massive. It's been absolutely massive. I can't understate it. You know, all the people who have, you know, in the last week congratulated me, wished me the best. You know, people I never would have expected stopping mum and dad at football matches to congratulate me. So the impact it's had is absolutely huge. To be honest, I don't think a lot of people in my family knew the impact that it would have. So it's been absolutely phenomenal. It's, in a lot of ways, it still hasn't sunk in. But yeah, I think when you look at the caliber of finalists there, you know, there was 5 excellent other finalists there. I think any of them could have won it, to be perfectly honest. You know, for example, there, like Sarah Kelly at 18 years of age, like absolutely phenomenal what she's done. Like Dave Melody has made a career out of farm management. You know, Seamus Lee has gone on and is milking goats, which I don't think is too common. So, I mean, it just goes to show you the variation that's out there and the opportunities that are out there. And I think agriculture is in a really safe place at the minute with the next generation that's coming on.
Elaine, I mean, I want to pick up on that we obviously need people like Christopher. We need enthusiastic young people like Rob, like Donal, like to drive on our sector. But as you said, there are challenges. And having a community like Mockra provides around the country, the clubs, obviously you've Make the Move with the mental health initiative as well. And it's obviously something that you highlighted as part of your pre-budget submission. We need to make sure we're minding our young farmers as well. And I think Rob touched on that as well, about sometimes the isolation and the loneliness. We might associate that with maybe older farmers, but it does affect younger farmers too.
It affects younger farmers hugely. Like Mockra offers a social outlet for people in rural Ireland. If anybody is tuning in and want to join Mockra, definitely do. Like the social aspect of it is well worth it, as the competitions. But just coming back on the whole mental health side of things, with the challenges that we face in the farming community, it does take a mental toll. It's the uncertainty that's there. And in 2018, Make the Move was started in Mockra in North Tipperary. When they noticed a high rise of suicides in the farming community, in particular in males. And we relaunched it last year with a new logo and a new tagline. Make the Move is currently inundated with calls. Our helpline, unfortunately, is now a callback service because we cannot keep up with the calls that we're receiving. And the calls that we're receiving have all down to succession, worries about, we'll say, income. It's all about just, like as you said yourself, Aisling, that it's not just in your farm things are going wrong. It's everywhere, but nobody wants to talk about it. As well in Make the Move, we offer a subsidised counselling service, which is inundated. And Make the Move is such a vital service for rural communities, and especially the farming communities, and we are not government funded. We are solely relying on fundraising. Personally, I do not want to cycle Mizen to Malin ever again. There's clubs across the country that are doing fundraisers.
I don't either. I'm just going to say that too. No fair play to you.
But like it's now that we're relying on fundraising. Yeah. That's no way to provide a service to our farming community. This is why I'm stressing the point to our Minister of Agriculture, Charlie McConalogue, and our Taoiseach. Somebody once backed them. We now need to be backed as the young farmers, and the whole of the farming community need to be shown support in this budget.
Donal, is it a lonely place to be a young farmer when things get tough?
31 days in a month, sure, 25 of them will be good and the rest of them will be bad. You know, depends on the weather, depends on the day. It can be. Well, I'm blessed with Paddy every day, out every morning, 8 o'clock every morning, conversation. Talk to you every morning. Make a plan what you're doing for the day. It's a great help.
Yeah.
You know, you see someone.
So that's what helps you cope with the tough times, to talk it out, to plan, to maybe see the light at the end of the tunnel if things are getting
8 o'clock every morning.
Yeah.
That is. So, and talk it out. No, he make a plan, and he'd always. It's just someone, talk to someone, you know.
Yeah. Rob, how about yourself? Like when things get tough on farm, what's your advice to young farmers out there? Because I'm sure many of them will be listening and they'll think, you know, it's hard.
Well, just to come in on that, I suppose one of the huge things, and to put a positive spin on it, a lot of mental health issues, challenges on a farm, can come down to a very, there's a few, common grounds there regarding transfer of the family farm succession. That leads, a poorly handled succession plan can lead to a severe mental health issue. False hope in many cases, and lack of that discussion can be huge. That's why land mobility actually can really turn things on the positive, because land mobility, basically what it does is it joins up farmers that might be outpriced, like myself, like this man, who might be outpriced of, the local farm because it might be heavily dairy. So you might have the opportunity to have Mickey Joe, who's farming beef down in the far side of the village, and he wants the farm while he's living. He has 2 daughters and they have no interest in the land, and good luck to them. But he wants the farm to be farmed the way that he has had it farmed. And he doesn't want to take the soup and give it to high-paying dairy farmers. He wants to see the dairy farm. He wants to see the beef farm that he's had extended on. So what he'll do is he'll go to the Land Mobility Service. The Land Mobility Service will then, like an online dating website, like Tinder, like anything, they will find a match. And they will come in and they will join and they'll sit down, and Land Mobility will facilitate this discussion. and give the young people that are priced out of the market, maybe whatever issues went wrong, give them the opportunity to be a farmer. It's gone to a stage now where you're being priced out of being a farmer. And that should never be the case, because it brings so much money, as we're all well aware in this room. But it's vitally important. Through the Make the Move, then, you have the door to knock on in your darkest hour, you know. And to be quite frank and honest, if you're between 17 and 35 and you're not in Macra, regardless of your job, you know, if you're from a rural area and you're not in Macra, you're missing out. You're missing a trick. You know, you're missing a structure, a support network, and very much so now, I suppose, with the immigration at the moment, we're having an awful lot of people being left behind. And the beauty of Macra is it's like, you know, the dots. You know, you might have 10 young people in your area that you've never knew from Adam, but once you join Macra, that door opens. You know, you're not left on a cold winter's evening arriving into the pub to stare into a pint by yourself, or to go for a cup of coffee by yourself, or to look at the stars and wondering why you didn't make enough silage, or what weather didn't go your way, or why things didn't happen. You have a problem shared is a problem halved. And all we need is the friends. And as I always say in Macra, there's no strangers in Macra. There's only friends you've yet to meet. And every one of us has a common pain, I suppose, depending on where the country you're from. But we all have a common ground. And that's the beauty of Macra. To be quite honest, we don't usually have... we have to have bouncers, right, for insurance reasons. But I've never seen one been put to work. If you ever want a handy job, lads or ladies, go for
You're very well behaved, Elaine, your gang, are you?
Very well behaved.
Christopher, I'm going to cross back to you again. I suppose in terms of that community with Macra, is that something that you've experienced as well?
Yeah, and I suppose it was something I was only chatting to Rob about last week at the event. When I was younger, I probably would have been more heavily involved with it. And I suppose with the nature of starting into the new business, you devote the time that's needed to get it up and going. But as part of that, I would have... We're now living beside the farm. I'm originally from Cavan. The farm is in Westmeath. So it's certainly something that now we've kind of done the hard graft and got the farm to where it's going. It's certainly something I would like to do, would be get involved with maybe a local club and get a bit more involved in the locality that we are now, because I think no more than what the guys have said, like the friends that you can make out of, you know, that if something's going terribly wrong and you need someone to a bit of support, like to have that support network on your doorstep is absolutely huge in farming. No more than any other thing, you need to be able to turn to people. But I think in farming, more than anything else, you need to have plenty of people you're able to turn to. So that's something I definitely like to do in the future, is get involved in the local club where we are now.
Okay, we're going to open it up to the floor here, because in the Agriland tent we're definitely not alone, despite the lovely weather outside. And I'm going to open the floor there to a question. Thomas Duffy is joining us. Thomas, you're very welcome to the podcast. And what would you like to add?
Thanks very much. I'll go easy on the new president, but I suppose simple question: is the government, through both national and EU funds, doing enough for young farmers?
No. Simply no. They aren't. Because any time we go knocking on their door as the young farmers, the engagement levels we get are minimal. I have to say, as national president of Macra, over the last year and a half, have I been disappointed with some of the engagement that we have received as the minority group of 6.9% of the population under the age of 35 being farmers? Yes. Have we been taken seriously? Maybe sometimes. Have we got any of our asks delivered on? Minimal. Am I hopeful we get something in this upcoming budget? I really want to say yes, but I really don't know. And that's feeding into the uncertainty that's there for young farmers. Yeah. There's so much more that could be done. And that brings me back to the point that we got the Commission on Generation Renewal. If that was something if you were a politician sitting here right now and that was something that you wanted to deliver on, that you wanted to ensure that you were doing something on generation renewal, the finer details will be out to the farming organisations and all relevant stakeholders. We would know the plan going forward, but no, we know nothing. We are left in the dark.
Because I was at a meeting recently and the point was made that time isn't on our side. You know, there's a huge proportion of farmers who are over the age of 65. They might want to take the option of maybe a retirement scheme. And equally, there's young farmers who are trying to get in and they're making these big life choices and they can't afford to wait either. So as you said, the clock is ticking here, Elaine.
The clock is majorly ticking. I have phone calls daily from MOCRA members. One stands out to me, a 32-year-old asking me should he go back and do an apprenticeship because he doesn't know if he was actually going to take over the family farm or not, because the conversation around succession has not happened. I'm very fortunate. My situation at home, I knew exactly at the age of 14 what farm I was being given. Like, we need to normalise the whole conversation around succession. The conversation needs to happen earlier. I know it's a hard thing for parents to do, but it's something that everybody around the table should be talking about this. As my mother said to me, she'd prefer to sit at the table and talk out any conflict than not be there and for myself and my brother to fall out with one another. But when you think of succession, the minute you mention succession, what happens is silence. Because nobody wants to talk about ageing, nobody wants to talk about dying, and nobody wants to talk about conflict. But we have to normalise this. And it is brilliant to see that the other farming organisations are now speaking about succession. Now, there was one point that maybe I'm not overly happy with, is we are banging the drum for a succession scheme. We want the transfer of managerial role from the older farmer to the younger farmer while the older farmer has been incentivised, because there's no point lying. We cannot have a living on our state pension. The other organisations are calling for a retirement scheme. When you hear the word retirement, that's an exit. While we want, I suppose, a gradual exit and an entry. We want 2 points. While everybody else is banging the drum for retirement, we are going to continue going for succession. And as I told the Taoiseach, it's now time that our government puts success into succession in this budget.
We're going to go back to the floor now for another question. Go ahead.
Just wondering, for a young farmer, is there any chance of you try and go into a bank or any that they will not look at you to try and get, backing for a loan or anything to get machinery? So is there any chance you could help do something with that?
So we're talking about farm finance and I suppose young farmers going into the bank looking for finance. Elaine, what's your experience with that?
Look, great question, John, especially when I'm after coming from AIB and Bank of Ireland panels straight onto this one. Look, the banks are doing what they can do for finance. We as an organisation, we need to do more calling on help there for young farmers when it comes to finance. But I do think what would be interesting is to find out Rob and Donald's experience of going for finance, especially around farming.
Yeah, Rob, how did you get on when you applied for finance or tried to get some finance?
I suppose regarding fairness and equality, there's a fair differentiation between a beef farmer and a dairy farmer. And you go into a bank. Do you know what? Do it for the crack someday. Go into a bank in the west of Ireland and tell them you want to be a beef farmer. And if they don't laugh, you're not in the bank. It's really, really difficult. There's no if, buts, or maybe. If you want to be a dairy farm, perfect. Yeah, I actually studied dairy herd management with the aspiration to change the farm into a dairy farm. And to come back on the bank side of things, we have some of the most expensive loans in the world in Europe for young farmers. So I wouldn't agree with that 100% either. But at the same time, if the business isn't viable, in the west of Ireland, if you can't get your cows out on the 1st of February, even for a day grazing, you're up against it. You're up against it. That's the crack. You're not going to get too much money. You're going to pay over 7% for it, and you're going to be happy about it. And that's the way we're kind of sold the pup here in this country. You're sold that you're going to have this opportunity to be indebted and paying off this for the rest of your life. And if you do well as a beef farmer in the west of Ireland, your grandkids might pay it off for you. But that's another side of the story, another flip to the coin. But if you want to be a dairy farmer, back to your question, 100% you can get finance, yeah.
Donald, what was your experience getting finance and accessing finance?
No, it was good now, in fairness, and with dealing with the AIB bank. And the only blessed that I had so many income streams coming in, and I was able to balance out. I hadn't any real issues with it, like, you know.
Yeah.
It was working.
Yeah. Absolutely. And is it something, because we did have the banks here as well, and they were saying there's access to finance and all the rest of it. Do you get calls very frequently from MOCRA members, Elaine, saying that they're struggling to access finance? And as Rob mentioned there, is it sector specific?
Yeah, we do get a few calls. I wouldn't say that we're inundated with calls now. We do get a few calls. Rob is correct by saying the sectors. Yes, there is a difference, but it really is down to two. I suppose who your advisor is in the bank and the bank manager. It seems to be the biggest thing.
Christopher, I'll bring you in here again. I mean, starting off as a young farmer, there's lots of overheads. I mean, there's a lot of costs on farms. There's high costs on every farm this year. But, you know, when you're a young farmer starting out, accessing finance, what's your experience been?
I suppose it no more different than any of the rest of the lads. It was difficult, particularly because I was going to the bank looking for an unsecured loan. But without the security of a farm at home. And look, I was refused plenty of times, and I just kept knocking the door down and kept coming back and improving the business plan. And, you know, I have to say, I do all my banking with AIB and Eamon O'Reilly in particular, and I could not recommend him highly enough. He's been a great support to us. You know, I suppose the only flip side is that, yes, no more than what Rob said, the finance is probably dearer than in my circumstance because it was all unsecured. So, yeah, that was the big thing I noticed. You had to have a very, very robust business plan going to the bank, or else it was an immediate no. You had to have a really, really robust business plan and a good opportunity. And
did you find that disheartening, Christopher, or did you find it nearly encouraging and kind of buoyed you on to keep going? Or did you feel knocked back by it?
I suppose going backwards, even maybe as far as 2017, 2018, there would have came up the opportunity to lease a local dairy farm. At the time I went for it and unfortunately didn't get it. But I remember going back to the bank at the time and the one thing I said to him, I'm going to get another opportunity. So what do I need to do to be in the best position to be able to draw down finance? And the one thing they said, you need to put as much capital as away. Because you're coming in unsecured, you need to have capital to your name. So I suppose what the big thing I done that kind of spurred me on, I worked hard, I saved as hard as I could for 4 or 5 years when I was working in industry. And when the opportunity did come up, I was in a position to go to him with a business plan that I knew had been tried and tested and was going to stand up. And between having the capital in place and having a business plan that I knew and they knew was going to stand up, it actually was relatively easy that the final time that I went to them.
How have you managed with costs this year on farm, Christopher? Has that been tough?
It's been a tough year, particularly the springtime. We'd be on a mixed farm. We would have some low-lying peat ground, and a lot of that didn't dry out until into April. So that brought an awful lot of cost with it. We were feeding more meal than we normally would, and there was silage in the diet for longer. So you know our peak milk production was probably back. I suppose I'm only in the business 3 years. And the first year was great. 22 was fantastic. If we could have years like that every year, we'd be delighted. And 23 was the polar opposite. So we were after coming through a year where fertiliser was the guts of €1,000 a tonne, meal was heading for €500 a tonne. And even though, and milk probably been back at 33, 34 cent last year, you know, even April this year, milk had risen to about 37. Fertiliser had begun to behave a bit more sensibly and meal had come down. So even though peak production probably didn't hit the heights we would have liked to see, costs were behaving themselves a little bit better. So we were able, it was a tough spring, there's no doubt about it. And you know, I find in dairy farming, you're kind of chasing your tail for the first half of the year. You're kind of loading a lot of the costs through in the first half of the year. And when you can get through that and get to this stage of the year, you're in a better position to come out at the end of the year having made a few pound.
Fantastic. Well, Christopher, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on becoming the 2024 FBD Young Farmer of the Year. And I want to thank all of my guests on the panel today. Of course, Elaine Houlihan, the Macra President, Donal Phelan, who's a farmer in Kilkenny and has availed of the Macra Land Mobility Service, and also Rob Lally, who's farming in County Mayo as well. Thank you all so much for taking the time to come in, and thank you so much for our audience here as well in the Agriland tent for our second live podcast as part of our coverage here at the National Ploughing Championships. And now we're going to head back over to Agriland editor Stella Meehan.
Hello and welcome here. We're here at the Teagasc tent with dairy specialist with Teagasc, Patrick Gowan. Patrick, we have in front of us here a lovely farm model. Patrick's going to be talking to us about a bit about the year, how it went. Been a tough year for farmers. Grazing has been tough, Patrick, and look, just talk us a bit about how you felt the year as well. And obviously, you're a local dairy farmer here. We've all seen it; it's been tight. How has farmers been coping throughout the year?
Thanks. Yeah, I suppose, look, as you say, it's a tough year, and I think you nearly have to go back into last year. So, like last year was a tough year. So we had 2022, obviously the record year. Costs went up about 34% into 2022 from the war in 2021, and that cost structure maintained into 2023, but obviously the milk price dropped down. So we had that impact on farms, so new cost structure, lower milk price. And that was obviously in any year, the weather makes everything was complicated with a bad year. So we had a very wet year from July all the way through to spring. So while this spring was bad, it was amplified by having a bad spring the year previous. And I suppose it's a tale of two stories then. We're actually across the country now, the farm, it's gone dry. So we're back on annual growth across the country on pasture base by about a tonne. Just it's a cooler year, and then we're also seeing a split within the country as well. Like, so this part of the country and down to Kilkenny, Carlow, dry, very dry, feeding from a drought point of view. And if you go west there, they got a lot of wet weather and also feeding as well. So it's probably a year of extra feeding,
yes.
And consistent feeding, because we just weren't able to go to grass because of weather.
Yeah. And look, Patrick, you talked about cost there, and look, obviously a lot of lads were buffer feeding silage, which was not the ideal this year. But like you talked about before, the costs. So when you're feeding meal, you talk about the trends in production. The last couple of years, we've seen farmers trying to get a response in milk off meal. But it shows that feeding grass is the way forward, and that's the only way you're going to really see margins. Like.
Yep. Yeah, so look, we did analysis just to see that. So we went through profit monitor data from our dairy discussion groups. Yeah. It was about 720 people, and we went down through it. And we just ranked them on profit per cow. So the top 10%, bottom 10%, just see what was the difference. So what's cause and profit on dairy farms. And we're using 2023 data. And when we looked into that, there was two main things that came out. Half the difference, so the difference between the top and the bottom was about €1,100. So the top farmer making 1,100 more than the bottom farmer in the data set. And half the difference was gross output. So they had a higher gross output, so basically sold more. And the other half was on cost control. So there's two parts of it there. And actually, if we dive into the gross output, and what you're talking about, the response to meal, the extra output didn't come from extra meal. So if we look at the top 10% and the bottom 10%, they actually fed the exact same amount of meal. So it was about 1.1 tonne of dry matter. So the extra output came from a higher milk price, getting better fats and proteins, which is great to see from all the work we're doing with our EBIs and breeding coming along the line. But also, it was actually, when we looked at it, they put about 300 to 400 kilos of dry matter extra grass to their cows. And that's equating to about 1.5 kilos extra dry matter per day. Yeah. So if we want to go forward and look at the more profitable one, it's not actually about how much meal you feed, it's how much grass can you get through your own cows. Yeah. And that was driving half it. And the other half then, it said it was in cost control. And what we're seeing in costs is a massive variance in costs. And maybe potentially, so if you look at back 18, drought year 19, 20, 21, every year was a little bit better than the rest, and then 22 went very well. And maybe we took our eye off the ball with it in cost control. So we're seeing a massive range in what people are spending to do. Take veterinary, for example. The average costs you about €89 per cow, but the range is from 50 to 150 euro. Yes, yeah. So there's scope there for people to have a look what they're doing.
Huge variation, Patrick, yeah. And so look, when we're on the topic of cost, look, we have in front of us here the kind of ideal layout, one could say, for a kind of, in terms of slurry capacity, slurry storage, water quality. Do you want to talk us through it here, Patrick?
Yeah, thanks. So I suppose what we wanted to demonstrate, I suppose, is best practice. So what we be saying is best practice solves all problems. So if we design our yards right, It'll be more efficient from a labour point of view, better from a cow flow point of view, better to expand it again going forward. And also, if you get all them things right, it'll improve the water quality in the farmyard because you're controlling a lot of these things. So a couple of things here, like, so we have the cubicle shed here, and you can see there's a slatted tank there. So we have full control at the cows. So the cows will be emptied down the shed and across the slats into the milking parlour. And you can see whenever the cows are in the yard, we have full control by the nature of that slatted tank of the movement across the yard. We're also situated the milking parlour beside the cubicle shed to minimise the movement, so we're not moving across yards and through yards. The other thing then is we have the cow flow set up in a way that the cows can come straight in and straight back to grass on the roadway. The other thing we looked at there is there's 3 main movements in any farmyard, and what you want to do is to have them together but not crossing over. So in this example, the cows can come in to milk and return. The tractors can be working over in this section here, and the milk lorry can come in. So the 3 main movements in the farmyard, side by side, but not crossing over. A couple other things, obviously, we have the tower here just to represent the need for extra slurry storage. So it's a key question. If you do you have enough slurry storage? If you don't, maybe you should consider putting it on. And slurry actually is becoming very important coming forward as we reduce our chemical nitrogen. The value of the nitrogen in our slurry becomes more important to grow grass. We also, the cows will be calved in this section of the farm. We have the calving shed directly opposite to minimise the movements there. We've covered dunkstead and silage, 2 silage pits to show maybe should we have a second pit for quality and one for bulk tank. And the other thing, main thing, what we like from a design point of view is what we call expansion lines. So in a well-designed yard, if this was to get bigger, so if this farmer had the opportunity to expand, the milking parlour would move back, the cubicle shed would move back, but the flow of the yard doesn't change. And you'd often see as people expand, next thing there's a shed put in the wrong place, and then you're back to moving cows through yard. So it's designed for all them things in together.
100%. And look, Patrick, I suppose this is all well and good, you know, having this design, but I suppose next year, you know, there's uncertainty around the derogation, where we're going to be going. So, like, our lads, should they be investing now? Is it something that you think farmers should be considering they don't know how many cows they're going to be milking next year, which is
yeah, it's look, obviously with the derogation there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's a fair question for a farmer to ask. Like, it's a very obvious one: how many cows will we be milking in a couple of years' time? And hopefully, and that's the big thing, that we do retain the derogation. And it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing there. Like, unless we improve the water quality, we won't have the derogation. So part of that would be having enough slurry storage to make sure we put the slurry out at the right times. That'll have a massive impact from water quality point of view. The other thing is what we were saying with the slurry storage, I already said, is by putting the slurry out at the right time, we'll get better use of the nutrient in it, and that's going to be very important to grow the grass as well. So there's a couple of things like that. And I suppose the key question is, have you enough slurry storage at the moment? And if you don't, you probably need to invest. There's a lot of options out there that you can do it, and there's also very good tax write-offs there, so it mightn't be actually as dear as you think for a farmer to do. I would suggest for any farmer looking to make any sort of, maybe to contact your local Teagasc office, do a business plan, look at the figures, set it up and see. If you're unsure and you're going to bide your time, that's fair enough. Then you will have to look at different options, and maybe the amount you need mightn't be a whole pile more. So it should be looked at least anyway.
Yes, 100%. Look, that's a lot, Patrick. Thanks very much for your time.
Hello folks, we're here at Ploughing 2024 and we're here now at the Dawn Meat stand, and I'm Hello folks, we're here at Ploughing 2024 and I'm here at the Dawn Meat stand, and I'm joined by the Dawn Meat's Group Development Manager, Paul Nolan. Paul, I suppose you're only in this morning, you're all ready to go for the ploughing.
Absolutely, you can feel the place is buzzing. The weather is a great plus, and a lot of people that I think maybe we're going to come are definitely coming, and you can see the traffic this morning, they're on the way.
Yeah. And of course, plenty to see here at the Dawn Meat stand, Paul. We've some cattle here as well, and then there's plenty of the team here from Dawn Meats as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So every year we come here, we're part of Angus Beef Ireland at the ploughing. So what happens is that we have a number of procurement people from all of our plants on a daily basis here to meet people who are from the various parts of the country.
So Paul, I suppose looking at the beef trade this year, I suppose what's been happening this year and how is it compared to other years?
It's been a really odd year in lots of ways. First of all, demand across Europe has been unfairly sluggish. And all along people were looking for markers. We were hoping that the Euros might give it a lift, but then we're hoping the Olympics might do it for us, and it really didn't happen. But at the same time, I suppose cattle numbers were tight coming out, particularly I suppose given the low temperatures that we had in the spring and the lack of good grass growth. So it kind of kept things right, and therefore prices have been very strong year to date, I reckon.
Yeah, and of course supplies, Paul, we've seen over the last couple of weeks have really picked up. Is that trend expected to continue in towards the end of the year, or what's going to happen with regards to cattle supply?
I don't think it'll continue to pick up if you look at Board Bia's figures and predictions. I'd say what's happening at the moment is there's just been a little bit of kindness in the weather, and there's been a bit of extra thrive, and when you add that to the fact that people are probably doing sums on their winter feed calculations, there's a bit of a movement, but I don't expect that to be the trend going forward.
And Paul, of course, we've seen large volumes of cows coming out all year as well. Do we think the majority of them have gone through the system, or will we see, I suppose, further spikes in cow kills as we're heading into the final quarter of the year?
I suppose you can answer that two ways. Yes, there has been a big kill, and we don't expect to see it going forward. However, I suppose things like derogations and plans at dairy side and things are going to determine that. So you still could see a further increase, but I suspect it won't happen.
And I suppose by and large, Paul, maybe the fodder situation mightn't be too bad on a lot of farms, but on other farms we're seeing really dry conditions and a lot of farmers having to feed out silage maybe earlier than they had expected. Do you see this across the country, or do you think fodder supplies could be an issue this winter on some farms?
Well, obviously I'm no expert on the farm side, so I don't quite know where the fodder supply situation is, but we do take heart from the Minister's actual feed committee, who do try to keep ahead of that, and at the moment the signals are, a bit of caution but not fear.
Yeah. Okay, and I suppose back to the beef markets, Paul, I suppose looking to the future and even at present, I suppose, is there any indicators of where we're going with regards trade and demand for beef?
No, I think it's very much a question at the moment, as steady as she goes. I think there will be a good demand for in-spec cattle in particular, and we'll have to wait and see what Christmas orders will be like. Imagine we're talking about Christmas at the ploughing, but it will come soon enough in terms of the ordering, and that'll tell its own tale. But basically I think there's a degree of confidence that things are reasonably steady keel.
Thank you very much, Paul.
You're welcome.
Well, that's all from our live stream from ploughing of day 2 of Ratheniska in County Laois. I hope you enjoyed it. Some interesting panel discussions and some very interesting conversations around the ploughing site today. It's still quite busy here with the weather being nice and the longer days. People are really enjoying day 2 of the ploughing, and we'll be back again tomorrow with our live stream. Don't miss it. Stay tuned to Agriland for our schedule of what's happening with our live events in the tent, and do stay tuned to all social media because you might see yourself in our highlights wrap later today.